You strong.
Hi, everyone. I'm Louise Baigelman. I'm so excited to be joined today by amazing author Sharon G. Flake. We're getting the chance to have a conversation with her on the first day of Black History Month to talk about culturally relevant literature and engaging stories and the impact of the books that she's written on readers around the world. So as I said, I'm Louise Baigelman. I run Storyshares, which is a literacy organization focused on inspiring striving readers at any age and level by providing them with engaging and diverse books that make them want to read more. And our special guest, Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today. Sharon is an author, best-selling author of many books. Sharon, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
First of all, hello, Louise. Hello, Storyshare audience. It's nice to be here. I've been writing, published, I'll say for 25 years, I believe. People know me most from this book, The Skin I'm In, which was my first novel. And there are like about 1 million copies out there. The rest of my books equal about 2 million out there. And I tell stories about African-American youth, primarily youth who were like me, in a sense, who grew up in inner cities around the country.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And personally, for me, this is a special interview because Sharon, The Skin I'm In, the book that she just showed, was actually read by one of my 6th grade students when I was a teacher. And it was the first book that she read that she actually loved reading and that she felt connected to, and it made her feel confident and seen. And that was the seed of her journey as a reader. So that's really special. And also Sharon has been a judge for us several years now in the Storyshares contest, which is special as well. So we're excited. Thank you so much for giving us the chance to ask you a few questions around reading and writing and your books. I think I'll dive into a few questions.
Absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to start with writing. So you mentioned at one point that you went to college to become a pediatrician, but that you ended up majoring in writing instead. And we're so glad you did, of course. Love to hear about kind of what caused this major shift for you.
It was easy. I tell kids, I absolutely sucked at math and science. And if you don't have those skills, it's, you're not going to be a doctor, folks. But what I love about college is that you get to, dibble and dab into different courses and to find your stride and to figure out what you absolutely are good at or passionate about. And I discovered that I was pretty good at writing.
Wonderful. And one of the things that we love so much about your books and that mattered so much to my student, Ruth, who loved your books, was that you don't shy away from writing about tough topics. And that's one of the things we really care about. We actually have a tough topics category in our last contest. Why is it so important to kind of shine a light on and give a voice to some of these lesser talked about topics?
Well, I think people should remember that, Shakespeare took on tough topics. August Wilson takes on tough topics, right? You're looking at people, you're looking at the cultural norms of the day, you're looking at their environment. And so, first of all, to me, it was a no-brainer, right? I started off again with The Skin I'm In, and it talks about colorism, it talks about bullying, and talks about finding your voice and a few other things. I tell people I wrote that book because I gave birth to a dark-skinned, beautiful daughter, and I wanted her always to feel amazing about who she was. Who knew that it would be for so many other children, right? Children in India, in South America, African American girls here, African American boys here. Had a Hispanic boy once who wouldn't read anything, his teachers told me, and then they gave him The Skin I'm In, and he took that book, went home, translated into Spanish for his Spanish speaking grandmother. So first of all, young people will read a host of different kinds of stories, and if we do our job well as writers, you will find a glimmer, if at the very least, of yourself in that story. I think one reason young people like my work so much is that I don't just not shy away from tough topics. I sort of show the whole person. On some days, we are amazing human beings, and some days we are not, right? And my characters very often are saying to the reader, "Hey, come over here, come a little closer. Now I'm going to tell you my story. Now don't judge me." And what ends up happening, I think, for a lot of teens, they do feel judged. They do feel as if, well, I could talk about this with my mother or my teacher, but I can't talk about this. Or I just don't want you to know.
Right.
That I don't think when I was young that I ever told anybody that I didn't feel okay in the skin I was in. Not the complexion, but just when you're in middle school, it's like my legs are too skinny, my teeth are too big. I don't feel like I'm too smart. Like everybody's, they all dress better than me, right? So your brain is doing like, but on the outside, you're smiling, you're having fun. And it doesn't mean you're depressed, right? It just means you become at a point, I think, very introspective as a teen. And a lot of times you're like, you're on the short end. You put yourself on the short end, right? Not doing too well.
And so you can feel isolated in that.
Having those tough stories about relationships. What it feels like when somebody breaks up with you, what it feels like when you break up with somebody else. What does it feel like when you want to get even with somebody that sort of messed up your life? What do you do with all of that? And not being afraid to go there.
Right.
But at the same time, trying to still keep the humanity of that individual, to still, I want young people to wrestle with morally complex issues, right? And how do we do that? Unless we present different things to them. How do we know that they even know how to handle those things, or right? Unless you can have conversations about those things.
Totally. And read about characters that you connect with, having conversations about those things. It's, for me, the word relevance is one of my favorites when it comes to reading, because exactly what you're saying in middle school, and even now, being able to read a book and find a character that sort of voices some of the things that you're thinking but can't say, or that you didn't realize other people actually felt too, having that kind of relevance from a character you connect to feel more part of the larger thing.
And a character that almost gives you permission to say, hey, I was doing The Skin I'm In at a school a few years ago. It was like 700 kids in the auditorium. And I was asking the question, who's been bullied here? And all these hands go up, and I'm running around with the mic talking to people. Kids get very honest in that setting. You would think they don't, but they open up really well, at least with me. And one says, well, they tease me about my teeth, and somebody else is there teasing them because they're gay, and somebody else is because of their shoes. And it's become, right? So it's all of these people who are being felt like teased or bullied, and perhaps maybe never said anything to anybody. But the right novel, can help you say, oh, well, it isn't just me. And maybe I am more okay than I thought. And maybe I also have some tools now on what I could do. A situation similar to that, or how can I be a better friend, right? If I see something happen to you, you mean I really can speak up, or I can go to a teacher, or I can do this.
Some models for kind of how
we have some models for it. And besides that, at the end, I'm always hoping that you think it's a darn good book.
Totally.
entertaining, and you can have fun, or like, I can't put it down, I can't put it down, which happens
Exactly.
a lot when people read my book. So I feel blessed about that.
Exactly. Well, that's to me also the power of a great story is that actually, personally, someone who's distractible, if there's a book that I'm totally in, it's a great story that I love. I can't even hear anything around me because it's so, you're so sucked in. And so that your books, I know, give that to so many readers, which is such a powerful, powerful tool. And the then seed for them seeking out more things to read, which is how they become real readers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because every once in a while, I have a young person says, Miss Sharon Flake, I only read your books. And I'm like, wait a minute, I hope you read all of my books. But if you stop there, then I haven't done my job because I
Right.
only have 12, right? I want you to feel like, are there other books out there? Does
Right.
anybody write as good as her? Maybe there are people that write better than her. Maybe
Right.
there are different kinds of books. Librarian, teacher, mom, let me go to the bookstore, right?
Totally. Totally. Oh, books can be fun. I can enjoy reading, even just like some of those shifts in association too.
Right,
Right.
right.
What can I read next? Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. And yeah, and so on that note, actually, do you have any books that you remember as a young reader sort of loving initially, or that favorite early author?
I will tell you, it's funny because I have so many author friends, and I'm like, who can name all the books that they read, all the people that they read. I was not that person. And it's not that I don't remember at 67, I didn't remember at 20. But I remember going to the library a lot. I remember one book called, I think, Almost 16 or something. And it was about a girl and a boy and romance. And that impacted me because now all my books have a bit of romance in it.
Mhm.
Um, Langston Hughes was one of my favorites.
Mhm.
I read his book in middle school, and I just remember, think, hey, they sound like people I know. Of course, I didn't say it at that time, but I remember loving it because what they eat sweet potato pie, and they're talking. My mother did days work, right? She went to people's houses, she scrubbed the floors, she, dusted. Sometimes I went with her. I don't recall doing anything, but I went with her sometimes. There were people in that book that did that. There were people that just laughed and laughed. And I remember later as an adult, in my own family, there were stories I heard all of my life, and they were hilarious. And then I got older and thought, oh, those weren't so funny. And it made me think about Langston Hughes, that there were very of his short stories that everything wasn't funny, but Black people had managed a way to laugh through that pain, because otherwise you're not going to get through And
Yeah, I love
so
that.
him,
Yeah.
later on, it was the story of Malcolm X, right? That novel, I was a little bit older. There was some more radical people that I read probably in my 20s and things like that. Anne of Green Gables is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I ran into when I was later. So there's this hodgepodge of not all from when I was young.
Right.
I will tell you this one story very quickly, because your readers might think that your audience, this is funny. I still can see myself at about 12 or 13 in the bathtub reading my neighbor's book. And of course, what happens in the tub? And in my mind, I think all you got to do is put it in the oven and the daggone thing
Oh
is
no.
dry out. So what comes out but a crispy, curly, brown papered book with glue. At that time, everything was glue coming from it. So do not read your friend's book in the tub, because you have to do
And did
like
you
this
take it back to them as
and
kind of
pay back. Well, pay for it. It was literally destroyed. I was like,
what? So funny. Good to know. Don't put your book in the bath or the oven. Perfect. Well, and I'd love to talk a little bit about your, The Skin I'm In, which was your, big, huge hit book, and the sequel that you've written,
Life I'm In. Yeah.
which is wonderful. And I'd love to hear the story about that as well.
Well, I should have brought The Life I'm In so people could see that jacket. The Skin I'm In was like my first book. The first editor that read it bought it. So, I don't
wow.
have that history. When writers say, hey, I have like 50,000 rejection slips, I have maybe 10 from other books and picture books, but none from The Skin I'm In.
Wow.
So that's sort of an amazing thing. Again, it's about a dark-skinned girl who gets picked on and has to find her voice. And part of finding her voice is through writing, which her teacher helps her with, but also her dad wrote poetry. And so that's a nice thread that runs through it. Malika is one of those girls that people can't seem to forget as a character, and neither can they seem to forget her teacher, Mrs. Saunders. So that book is, in French, it's in Korean, it's in different languages, with people finding themselves. People have been asking me for years, please write another book, and I'm like, no. I didn't want to, because I was afraid. I really was afraid that I'll get it wrong. It won't be as well received, and people will, it's like a movie, that sequel to a movie, when you think, now why did you stop beforehand, right? But it turns out, The Life I'm In, which one woman wrote to me, and I'll never forget, and she said, I was in graduate school. I was the only Black student in graduate school. And I started to feel like, well, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe I don't have it in me. And she said, and then I remembered The Skin I'm In. Wow. And I read it, and I remembered that I could do anything.
That's amazing.
That's a testament, right? Totally. That is, so a book can become bigger than you as the writer. Like, you pour in and you write, but people don't talk about, I think, the spiritual side of the book, the part of the book the writer doesn't actually even control, that's coming through you, that gets on the pages and makes it, and connects with the reader, right?
Yeah.
I get goosebumps.
It's amazing. It's yeah, I do too, because it's, the ripple effects, the absolutely endless ripple effects of that, falling in love with the book, using it with your own child, and all of the ones that you don't know about that are also rippling in the same way from one story. And it comes back to that tough topics thing for me too, because a lot of times, trafficking is a great example. It's not, let alone something some people want allowed in books, right? But it's also just not something you see as often. And if that's any of those issues, like homelessness, all of that, if that's something that you've experienced, and you're reading all these books where everyone has lovely homes, right? But you finally find one where you get to see something reflected. Yeah, you can see how fundamental that would be to a sense of self.
And looking at humanity, and looking at what that looks like, and how do we intersect with that character. And very often we intersect with all kinds of people, right?
Right.
We have little pieces of our lives that, no, I've never ran away. No, I wasn't trafficked. But guess what? I was 14 months.
Right.
I was 13 months. And so I still know a lot, for me, about how that feels. And so I think what comes through my work is this sense of compassion.
Yeah.
Right. The sense of getting to reader to also understand that person, not feel sorry. Exactly. I think that's a very different thing.
Not pity.
But just be engaged with her story and see part of yourself at the same time, looking and seeing and learning about what their life situation is as well.
Right. And instead of the sort of the other version where it's like good and bad, and there's no way to kind of connect with either side. But if you can see that the bad has good and the good has bad.
Right. There's some good. And I think that's the thing about Char, that people read and said, well, in the first one, they thought she's terrible. In this one, they thought, oh, I didn't know her fully. I could see some other pieces and some other sides of her. And I think that's what happens in all of my books. I have people that are frank when they speak, but if you look at them, you get to see, oh, okay, yeah. Like Penn, I know we were talking about, this is a girl who It's about the only female wrestler on the team who's in love with a guy who is disabled and in a wheelchair. She absolutely loves him. He does not, he's not interested in her. She also doesn't read very well, and she doesn't have any real interest in reading well. And part of that is she is a wrestler. She is really good. I think that for her, she can't see herself, um, in that particular way. And so I wrote it because there's so many young people who read my work who have said, I hated reading. I hated books until I read your work. And so part of it is sort of a tribute to them, so that you get to see how tough it can be for somebody who is trying to deal with it, sort of, you're right, to deal with learning to read better, she's sort of embarrassed that she can't read better, but at the same time, she is she's extremely disciplined when it comes to wrestling. She's a magnificent cook. She is funny, and she loves hard, right? So it becomes this thing where none of us are perfect. We have and even though she's in love with Adonis, and Adonis has a 4.6 average, he's the go-to boy for teachers and librarians. He volunteers. He has all of these skills and talents, but he doesn't have something that she has, right? He doesn't have the capacity to be as social. He doesn't have the tolerance and the tolerance that she has, right? So we're all, have pieces of us that almost need to sometimes be fueled by other people, right? Or be pushed up against other people can help us be better.
And we can sometimes see ourselves in both characters in the story. A little bit of
ourselves. And it deals with issues of cheating. It deals with issues of what is smart, right? She is having difficulty reading on grade level. So does that make her not smart? It would be easy for a young person to say, oh, he's smart and she's not. But they both have their levels of expertise, and hoping that in schools that you get to wrestle with those things and have kids rethink and dig into those topics further.
Love that. It's such an important piece, right? And that's one of the things I love about your books, is that they're so graspable as stories, right? You can, for readers, as they're evolving in their reading skills, they're sentences you can read, and they can, we talk about it as accessible, readable content. And that's such a key piece, because so many readers at this point are far behind, and the worst thing to do when you have to try and practice your reading is pick a baby book, because you're reading below grade level versus having one that you can actually connect with. So that
I'm listening to you, and I'm trying to think about the page where the teacher is asking her to read. She's saying, can I, that she doesn't like to read. She doesn't want to.
That would be a perfect one to read. I
don't like to read. It's boring. I tell Miss Baker this all the time. She say not to give up. She's going to help me read better. That ain't never going to happen. Teachers tried before. I'm still way behind. My parents moved a lot, so I went to a bunch of different schools, sometimes 2 in 1 year. You put your head down a lot after a while, and don't worry about the new stuff they teaching, because you might not be there for the test know-how. I missed a lot of stuff, I guess. My goal is to be the best wrestler ever, not the best reader. I know it's too late for that. Miss Baker picks at her hair. I kicked the chair leg in front of me. Autumn, go ahead and read, she says. All right, give me a minute. Opening the book slow, I read a little to myself to make sure I don't mess up. There's so many words on the page. I know, Miss Baker, if I do good on 3 lines, she's going to make me read the rest. The clock on the wall ticks loud as a bomb ready to explode. I keep flipping pages, seeing words I never seen before in my whole life. This Kayla sure got a lot to say. 5 lines on the first page, 7 on the next. God, she never shuts up. How long is all this going to take, I ask? I can go on.
Love it.
What I tried to also do with that book is to break notions, because she's a great athlete. I think, and I'm not a great reader. It'll be easy to think, well, her parents aren't very helpful. Why don't her parents do? And she has these parents, and you get to see that they are struggling with reading too. But what do? They say, if you don't get your grades up, you're not going to be able to wrestle. And guess what? Her grades are fine for the school to let her wrestle, but they're not fine for her parents. And so they sit down together and they struggle and they wrestle, and she gets to see them working through that as she's working through that. And again, she has to be confronted with the only thing she doesn't do as well as she wishes, right? And then Adonis, who has to struggle with, I am absolutely great at everything.
Right.
When it comes to people, Autumn is amazing at, he's not quite there. And so somebody like Autumn can be helpful with him on that. He can be helpful with her on some other things. And so I want to wrestle with those. What does it mean to be gifted? What do we do with all that stuff? Nothing is black and white for the most part in my book. So
I love it. It's such important topics for that age in particular, when you're trying to understand, what do I identify with, and what am I good at, and to your point earlier, feeling like you're not good at anything. And reading being one of the lesser known kind of issues, I think people talk about. If you can't read, that is, if you're struggling with reading, a lot of times you feel the need to kind of hide that.
Or you just will just maybe just pass it on. And again, we do this black and white thing. He's really smart, right? But she's not so smart. But what do you do when, she's very smart in a lot of areas. She's having some difficulty in reading. And every teacher wants him to do stuff. The principal wants him on stage. He has all of this, but he has something that challenges him as well. Right. But we don't always look at that. And so wanting people to be able to be in a classroom, pull that stuff apart and look at it.
I love it. The nuance. The human nuance in it.
The human nuances. And for kids in the classroom to see, wait a minute, maybe it's not, maybe I am putting people in boxes. Right. Like you're in that box because you get a 4.6, and and you're in this box because you're in this box with a 4.6 and you're a nerd. And sometimes we have negatives against kids who are excelling really well too in academically. So what are our misconceptions about all kinds of people?
Right. So that everyone can have multifacets, instead of having to fit into a certain box. I love that. It's and just also the voice, of your characters, and the readers can obviously you almost feel like you can hear yourself, thinking, I know that was one of the pieces for my students, with your stories. So, so much good stuff. I know that we're running out of time, but I'd love to, finish with, any last words you have, but also, any advice you would want to give to, one of these readers, a reluctant reader who maybe doesn't see the joy in reading.
Well, I would go back to Penn, and say that might be a good book to start with, not my only book. The first line of the book is, you ever like a boy your friends thought you shouldn't like? So all of my books, I think the first sentences are really powerful. I would tell that person, first of all, you are not alone. There are lots of people, Autumn included, who are challenged by reading or maybe don't think it's so interesting. So but there are all kinds of different books. There are graphic novels, there are short stories. I would say start with something short. Right? Because then I only have 3 or 5 pages and I really could do this, right? And then you start to build up. Go to your librarian, to your teacher, and ask, is there anything you really, that what you think I would like to read? Right. But also, I think, have teachers go to those students. Educators have to believe that all children will read, and that you have to figure out, it's their job to figure out, what do I put in their hands? to
Right.
get them reading. And not to limit it by ethnicity either, because I think sometimes people will think, oh, I've had people say, oh, well, I don't have any Black kids in my school, so that's why books are not there. It's like, do you know how many different people read my books?
Right.
That if the story is told well, I think Harry Potter might have one Black person in there, maybe none in the first one. I'm not sure. But right. And I know all kinds of young people, especially when my daughter was young, she read the first 5 volumes, right? And so I think people will read outside of their group. And I think more people do need to read Black stories with Black characters and brown characters. Because guess what? Your healing may be in that story. Your victory over reading, right, may be in that healing. You might decide, hey, I could be a writer based on, right? Those writers might be the one to help you say, the one thing I want to be in this world is a writer, and I'm absolutely going to do it.
Yeah. It's wonderful. So well put. And I love that as kind of a final message, the universality of books and characters, and it might not be the one you expect to connect with that really speaks to you. And so, thinking back about the importance of a diverse collection of books available overall, it's that variety that, allows you to find that book that really speaks to you, and it might not be where you expect it in that sense.
And don't rule out for young people who are like, I don't like reading. I can't tell you how many picture books I have in my house.
Yeah.
They're written for younger kids mostly. But guess what? They're amazing. You could start there. There's nothing to say that you can't start there. I read them, especially if it's some historical stuff. Sometimes that's where I start because it might be sometimes historical information might be dense. And so, okay, let me start here and make my way up to middle grade, high school. I love that. Then what the professors have to say, right?
Exactly. It's the scaffolding. Yeah. You can start wherever you are. You start wherever
you are. Don't be ashamed. Know you're not alone, and you can get there from wherever you are.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's such inspirational words for our readers and for readers everywhere. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll share with everyone some, more details on your books and some links where people can go to find.
I was going to say, link them up, connect them to my website, because they'll find all my books and my email there. So if they want to chat with me, we can continue the chat.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was lovely chatting with you today.
It was nice chatting with you.
Be strong.